I want to start an ongoing review of the Penguin Science Fiction Omnibus, which is a collection of 36 short stories considered to be the best of their time by Brian Aldiss. I want to go over the stories one by one and produce a video for each. But before I do that, I also want to let you know that I have a couple of reviews in the works. One is for J.G. Ballard's Hello America, which I bought specifically because we were coming back to America from Mozambique, and so I thought it would be appropriate to read. And I'm also going to review Edmund Cooper's 5 to 12, which is one of his middle period books about the domination of women over men. I also want to give a shout out to the YouTube channel Eternal Reading, which is run by Austin, who I think of as the Eternal Reader. And he's bought a copy of and has been reviewing my book, The Glassweaver's Tale, and other stories. And he's reviewed most of the stories as individual videos. And they're really great reviews, actually. They're very good. He's very insightful. He's a good reader, and he picks up on most of the things that I've been trying to say in the stories. And he also doesn't reveal the denouement in the various stories too, which is obviously a great encouragement to those who watch his videos to go and buy the book and read them themselves. And the people who have watched them have given them a fairly good response so far. So thanks so much to him, because as an indie author, my readers are my ambassadors, and they're really the only people who are going to get the message out there other than me. And so I depend on them crucially to have any impact. So thanks, mate. Thanks so much. So on to the Penguin Science Fiction Omnibus, edited by Brian Aldiss. Brian Aldiss was an author, anthologist, encyclopedist for science fiction in the 1960s and 70s, prominently in the 1960s and 70s. He was also active, I think, in the 50s and certainly in the 80s and 90s. But the 60s and 70s was when he was, I think, at his most productive, and certainly that was when he was most widely known. He's a UK author, and the stories that I know him for are Non-Stop, which is a colony ship story, and also for Hot House, which I think won a number of big prizes. And also he wrote the short story that is the basis for the movie AI, which was initially started by Kubrick, and then Spielberg had to take over when Kubrick died. And I've read, he initially wrote one story which inspired Kubrick to want to make the movie, and then he wrote two subsequent stories to fill out the plot for the movie. And I've read all three, and they're very good. And I would say they're probably among his best short stories. He was also an artist, and he had quite an accomplished artist, apparently. I'll show a picture on the screen. And he had an exhibition in Oxford in 2010, I believe. He's also an OBE, which is Order of the British Empire, whatever that is. I have no idea. The Penguin Omnibus is, as you might imagine from the title, an amalgam of three previous books: Penguin Science Fiction, more Penguin Science Fiction, and yet more Penguin Science Fiction, all edited by Brian Aldiss. And all of the stories in those three books have been collected in this book. This version that I've got here, and I'm pretty sure it's the version that I read. I think I owned it twice. The cover is by David Pelham, and David Pelham was the art director for Penguin. This is the Penguin edition. Well, obviously it's the Penguin Omnibus. He was the art director from 1968 to 1979. This is the 1975 edition. And by that time, Pelham was doing more of these kind of pop art cartoony covers, whereas he started out with these terrific airbrush covers, specifically for J.G. Ballard's novels. and I'll show a picture of those. They're really kind of stark, austere and surreal, which fits with J.G. Ballard's writing style for those early novels. But this is, I'm not quite so keen on this cover. It's certainly a striking image and makes you pause, but I'm less keen on this cartoony style of his. There are at least 2 other editions of the omnibus with different covers, and I'll show those on the screen now. I think I also read the middle one with the spaceship on it, and the third one, which looks like it has a Paul Jones cover, I've never seen. If you're interested in book cover art, then please go to my website, because I've been collecting a lot of science fiction art that appears on book covers, obviously, and you can find kind of potted histories, little thumbnails for many of the covers that you might recognize from 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s there. Now, for Wizard Jim, I must do the following, which is smell the book. It is a second-hand book, and so let's see what it smells like. It's ashy and autumny. It has a lovely autumn ashy smell. So Wizard Jim, this one has a great smell, lovely smell for a second-hand book. So I'm going to go through the stories in the omnibus one by one, read them, and then give you my thoughts on each one. So finally, on to the first story in the book. And the first story of the 36 is Soul Solution by Eric Frank Russell. Eric Frank Russell was a writer active in the golden era of science fiction. So he's like 30s, 40s, 50s, maybe even the 60s. I'll put a picture of him up on the screen. He's most famous, apparently, for his novel Wasp, which I have not read. I have read some of his other short stories, and I would rate him as actually pretty good. What an arrogant person I am. Anyway, so the first story is a piece of flash fiction. The story is it's about 2 pages long, and it's a great opener. It's very cleverly done. You're given this third-person view of, you think it might be a person, but it's not absolutely clear. It's never specified who the individual is that the story is recording, but we get his thoughts, and he is isolated and utterly alone and in darkness, and he must survive and not go insane in this darkness, and to do so he must use his imagination, the power of his imagination, to save himself. And I'll just read a few lines from the story. It's so short I could almost read the whole thing for you in the video, but I won't, because you should read it yourself. Get the anthology and read it yourself once I've gone through all the stories, of course, not before. And so here he's wondering how to get himself out of this problem. And so he thinks, no problem is beyond solution. By that thesis, science lives. Without it, science dies. He was the ultimate scientist. As such, he could not refuse this challenge to his capabilities. So obviously, although he's in this dark place, and he even seems to be a prisoner, because early on he talks about imprisonment without prior condemnation, punishment without sin. So who knows who this individual is or what they've done, but he is going to try and work himself out of this problem. And so he struggles with a way to achieve this, and he uses, as I say, the power of his imagination to do so. And so you're wondering who this person or this entity might be, and then you get the lovely denouement at the end, which twists the whole story on its head and puts a big smile on your face. And so the first one is a goodie, and I'll be reading each one after that and giving you thoughts on it in the subsequent videos. Okay, thanks for listening. Catch you soon. Bye.